Before you waste your time watching this video, let me remind you that this game is about card battling, as the English title of the game says. So if you don't like card battle games, then skip this one. But if you are like me and like card battle games, then I suggest you stay because we might have a little gem here. I don't have it yet, but this game was first released on the almighty PlayStation 2 as Cardinal Arc Konton no Fusatsu in the year 2003. However, the PlayStation 2 version remained its Japan exclusivity for some reason. So the developer Idea Factory, decided to re-release the game 5 years later for the PSP as Cardinal Arc Portable in Japan. But this time around, it was also released in the West as Neverland Card Battles, but only in North America for some reason, because Europe got nothing. Now, I would have loved to play the PlayStation 2 version as well, especially to see the differences between the original PlayStation 2 and, I assume, updated PSP version, but again, since I don't have the PS2 version yet, I can't do much about it. And as far as I know, there is no censorship. But I could be wrong, who knows. Now to the actual game. What you are gonna do here is use your deck to battle other characters with their own decks. Well, obviously. And it's all for the sake of saving the world, so... yeah, you can make the joke of saving the world with a children's card game. So, the story is like this. There is this continent called Neverland that humans and demons inhabit. But since humans and demons tend to cause a lot of chaos, there is a pillar god called Helgaia that wants to destroy all humans and demons to essentially purify the world. But the remaining 5 pillar gods don't like Helgaia's idea and therefore sealed him away in a shrine called Cardinal Arc. But to make sure that Helgaia doesn't revive at all, they have split his powers into a vast amount of spectral cards. Many years later, however, Helgaia is now trying to break that seal, and he does so by brainwashing one young girl named Refina to help him out. But at the same time, the protector of the seal called Agma awakens as well, and he now seeks the help of the so-called Dominators to keep Helgaia imprisoned. Dominators are the users of spectral cards. Now meet our hero, Galahad. He is one of those summoned by Agma to keep Helgaia at bay. After Agma explains to you how to play the game and you beat him in a practice match essentially, then it's now your job to stop Helgaia, meeting and defeating the other Dominators while you are at it. And each Dominator has its own goals, and those goals don't necessarily have anything to do with Helgaia. Story-wise, there's nothing complex here. However, I find one thing rather odd. So, Helgaia has seen how humans and demons have been causing pure chaos in the world by creating wars and shit like that, and therefore he wants to get rid of all of them so the world can be at peace. So at face value, I would assume that Helgaia actually isn't the bad guy here. After all, he wants to stop wars, chaos and destruction. From my point of view, his goals are actually very commendable, so why do the other gods want to stop him? Does this mean that all the other gods want to keep war, chaos and destruction going? Why? Well, okay, I mean, on the one hand, I can also see why Helgaia needs to be stopped, because I assume that he would rule over the world by literally killing everybody, even the humans and demons that are peaceful. But on the other hand, I can also see the point of view of the other gods that want to protect the innocent humans and demons from being killed by Helgaia. So I can see the good and the bad from both sides, and from that perspective I think the story is quite good. Because you essentially are hunting down a god that seemingly has good intentions. Good intentions from the perspective of the player, not Galahad. My problem with this is that even Galahad later on seems to understand Helgaia's point of view, but the game requires Helgaia to be defeated no matter what, and therefore the developers tried to make Galahad that overly optimistic hero that simply believes in the humans and demons and that they will stop the wars on their own altogether. You know, because that has worked damn good up until now, you see. This was a very big opportunity for this game to be morally mature and raise the question of who is wrong and who is right, maybe even let the player himself decide which side he's on like all the other dominators. But no, the player necessarily has to go up against Helgaia without even being able to question the morality of Helgaia, Agma and the other gods. Okay, not really Agma, because essentially he's just following orders. So I'm not saying that the story is bad, I'm just saying that it could have been so much better because the potential was there. But oh well, nothing can be changed now. So let's talk about the graphics real quick, because they are quite fine. Maybe a bit outdated even for the PSP. But then again, this is a port from the 5-year-old PS2 version, so who knows if Idea Factory actually improved anything. The colors tend to be on the darker side, which is fine by me, I actually quite like it. And the characters look fine, but nothing too special to see here. And by the way, this is another thing I would have liked to see. Playing as different characters. I mean, after all, Agma summoned different dominators to stop Helgaia, right? And each dominator has their own reasons for even being in that journey. So it would have been cool if we saw the story from the perspective of each character. Each character with their own personal motivations, weaknesses, strengths and pasts. Because compared to almost everybody else, Galahad is a bit bland. Who knows, maybe that would be too much to ask for the PSP? I don't know. Now, before I go to the actual gameplay, the sound is also quite fine in itself, but rather annoying. Annoying because it loops over and over and over and over again, and so if your duel lasts 20-30 minutes or so, you will hear the same thing constantly. Heck, even the select stage menu and your own menu share the same music. Why? But hey, there is also voice acting. Well, English voice acting, since this is the localized version, and to be honest, it's not too bad. Well, at least the dudes do a decent job at it, while all the chicks are rather annoying to listen to. You know that fake, annoying, cutesy way of talking some clearly adult women do? That's how most chicks sound in this game. But okay, let's talk about gameplay, because this is the most important and entertaining part. So I will use one of my battles later in the game to explain how it works. As you can see, you will play the game in a grid, which is common in tactical JRPGs, and your goal is to take as many squares as possible, because your ability to summon monsters depends on how many squares you have conquered in quotations. The more you have, the more monsters you can summon in one turn, but of course, the enemy can also conquer your own squares on top of having his own. So if you are good enough, you can even go so far as to conquer the whole battle arena to the point where the enemy only has a few squares on his own to move. which means that he can barely summon anything while you are kicking his ass. As you can see here, this is exactly what I did. This is a battle against Hellgaia 2, and here I've managed to corner him so much to the point where he had nowhere to go, and while he was busy with my monsters, I was taking the whole field as my own. Sure, he was defeating one of my monsters whenever he got a turn, but ultimately I kept summoning new ones around him, so he couldn't go very far. Now, the blue color is you and the red is your enemy. The cost essentially says how many monsters you can summon depending on the squares you own. And the monsters not only require a certain amount of payment to be summoned, which is the cost, but they also require a certain amount of payment to stay on the field and fight each turn. Meaning, if you can't pay the cost, the monster disappears from the field. The more monsters you have on the field, the higher the cost. And since summoning and keeping monsters requires you to have squares under your name, aka blue mark, then it's best to conquer the whole field if you can and stop the enemy from conquering your field. But pay attention, because magic cards also have a cost that you need to pay before use. If you can't pay, you can't use them. Same goes for base cards. Base cards are essentially cards that remain on the field that can have some support abilities to boost you and your monsters. Those base cards remain on the field as long as their HP isn't zero. Some monsters also require souls to be summoned, and this can only happen if you have monsters in your graveyard. One monster in the graveyard equals one soul. Usually, you can only summon monsters one square around you or one square around other monsters that are yours, of course. But if the monster has an attribute like fire, water, earth, or whatever, and the field has some squares with that attribute, then you can summon those monsters on those fields, no matter where. Well, as long as the enemy hasn't conquered those attributed squares yet, because otherwise you can't summon anything on those fields. So you can only conquer those attributed fields if they are blue marked or not marked at all. Deck should be obvious and hand should be more than obvious, but just for the sake of it, hand shows how many cards you have in your hand, while deck shows you how many cards you still have in your deck. The important thing about the deck is that once you can't draw anything else, if Galahad pays 5 HP, then the whole deck will be revived in quotations. If you can't pay those 5 HP, then your game is done. Now, talking about the cards themselves, you have AP, HP and DF. HP indicates health, AP indicates attack power, and DF indicates defense power. Now, I don't need to explain how HP and AP works. As long as you have HP, then you are still alive. The most important part here is that as long as your avatar is alive, then the game will continue. You only lose completely when your avatar lost all its HP, no matter how many monsters you have on the board. Now, to the defense. Most of the time the monsters won't have defense at all, but with effects added, defense can be added as well. So you have to break through the defense first before you can hit the enemy's HP, or vice versa. For example, if your attacking monster has 1 AP only and the enemy has 1 DF, then you only break through his DF or defense power, but won't deal HP damage. And finally, this is how the monsters battle. The animations are quite fun to watch and they never get annoying actually. I never felt the need to even skip the animations because they tend to be snappy. Sometimes though, it stutters a bit, but that's an issue with the console itself rather than the game. Or, in this case, it's an issue with the PSP itself. The battles are quite fun and rather strategic. The enemy AI can also be quite intelligent by acting smart with its actions and cards used. For example, he tends to not attack you directly if he knows that he will likely lose the battle, or he then tends to flee from you if he knows you have more HP than him. One thing they've missed here is that you can't upgrade anything. No upgradable cards, and Galahad also can't be upgraded. So the 25 HP he has from the start are the same amount he will keep until the end of the game, while some other enemies will have 30 HP or even 50 HP. So taking those 50 HP down can be a challenge, even more so if that character heals 2 HP per turn, like Hellgaia 2. On the other hand, not being able to upgrade anything means that you have to think twice or even 3 times before you do a move, which enhances the strategic aspect of the game, and it can be quite exhilarating being cornered by an enemy, being on your last legs, sweating like a pig trying to not lose the game, and then you draw that one card that you desperately needed to turn the game around. I had a few moments like that in the later levels, and man, when I managed to turn the game around, it was beyond awesome. But the game isn't too long either, well, technically. It only has about 16 chapters until you've beaten Hellgaia 1. But after the main story and after the credits, there will be a bit more stuff to do to get the real ending scene. So yeah, if you want to beat the game 100%, the game overall can be as long as the typical JRPG with 40 or even 50 hours, because of the little bit of grinding you have to do post-game, and some enemies can be hard to beat. For me though, I enjoyed the game more than I expected. Neverland Card Battles seemed like a mediocre card battle game with not much to it in the beginning, but after a while it turns out that this game can be rather deep, very strategic, and actually quite fun. Now, the story isn't too special, even though it had potential for way more. The music loops constantly, which can be annoying, as the voice acting of the girls. The colors are on the darker side, but I actually like it, and the character designs are fine. But what makes this game are the battles themselves. No, it's not the most complex card battle game you will ever play in your life, far from it, but for what it is, I was rather surprised by how much fun I had.